Hey, everybody, welcome back to View from the Top podcast, where we help growth-minded men who desire momentum in their business, their family, and their finances get through the valleys and up the mountain to their very own view from the top. As I said, welcome back. Glad you're here today. We have an awesome co-host with us. You could call him a guest, co-host, whatever you want to call him, but he's joining the conversation with us today. And it's around the idea of podcasting and being a guest. But even more than that, especially at the beginning, the first half of our conversation today, Alex Sanfilippo, we dive into actually some challenges and some things he's excited about in his business. And so you guys are here to listen and learn. And you saw the title of the podcast today related to podcast guesting. This is on the back end is all of that, and it's awesome. All the why is packed into the front. So listen through this episode with Alex Sanfilippo, and we can all learn. I'm going to listen to it again myself, maybe multiple times, and really be able to understand why podcast guesting can be so valuable to our businesses. There's some awesome nuggets in here. So get your pen, paper out, get your notes on your phone out, and get ready to go. Man, we're going to get him in here soon. But before we do, let's get Big A, the host with the most, Big A, Aaron Walker, in the house, in the studio. Welcome, Big A.
Come on, Wally. How's it going?
Hey, it's a great day here in Tennessee.
It was a great night for me last night. My granddaughter's in, just finishing up college for the year. And I don't know that I've said this, but I'm going to make it public because she wouldn't mind. But I get the distinct privilege of walking her down the aisle here just in a few weeks. She's getting married. Exciting. I can't imagine that I've got a granddaughter getting married. That just blows my mind when I think of it. Wally, do I look that old? I mean, that sounds like you need to be an old man.
I plead the fifth. Is that a...
Oh, okay. Well, you better say I look good. And you look way younger.
Don't look good. I just didn't comment on how old you look.
Hey, it's going to be pretty cool, man. You know, she made an assumption that I just knew that. And I'm like, I was with her and she said, Big A, have you got your suit yet? I said, well, yeah, I've got a suit. What do you mean, do I have a suit? She goes, no, do you have the right color suit? And I said, you going to choose what I'm wearing to the wedding? She said, you're in the wedding. And I said, what? And she goes, Big A, don't look at me like that. You know you're going to walk me down the aisle. And I'm like, man, what? And one of the biggest honors of my life was having my granddaughter ask me to do that. She told me. She didn't ask me.
That's Abby. Yeah. If you know Abby, though, that's exactly Abby right there. So.
Yeah. This is going to be fun, man. I'm pretty fired up. But, you know, we were talking about we're going to go down a little bit early and kind of hang out with Brooke and Bill and the family. And and we were talking about where we're going to stay, and different people are staying different places. And
this is out of state, the wedding.
It is out of state. It's out of state. Yeah. And so, we're going to another state. So I wanted to ask you a question, like, do you have a rule of thumb of like where you stay or like who stays with you? Like, do you mind staying with people in their homes? I don't know who's going to go first, me or you, but I want to share.
Do you want me to go first? Yeah, I'll go first.
Do you care where you stay? You stay anywhere? Do you stay with friends? No, we're not talking about family. Family's like a given, but just friends. How do you deal with that?
I like to. I like to stay with other people when we travel. Frankly, I'm always honest. So frankly, it is awkward. Sometimes I'm not going to lie. Like you don't really know what to expect sometimes. And,
sure.
And, we've had people that invited us to stay with them before, friends of ours. And, we get there and they want to give us their bedroom. So sometimes we choose, if we know them well, we'll be like, hey, can we stay? We're actually going to out of state as well. We're going to visit some friends, actually some ISI brothers, while we're down there. And no one's asked me to stay with them yet. And I'm not gonna ask either, just because I don't want that. I want our time together, like, to be special and meaningful. I don't I don't want them to feel obligated, whatever. If somebody asks, then great. And I'll talk it through now more than I used to. Like, hey, like, what's the sleeping situation? What's your schedules? That kind of stuff. But strangers, no, I'm not going to I mean, I don't do the Airbnb, stay in somebody's room in their house. I know people do that all the time, and that's not me either. How about you?
No, man, I'm not doing it. I'm just not. I get an opportunity to fly around the country a little bit because I have clients that I do one-on-one coaching with. And they've asked me to stay with them multiple times, and I don't for numbers of reasons. But one is I'm just not comfortable. Like
what do you mean? Like, you're afraid of something? It's like awkward? Like what?
It's awkward to me. It's like I'm in their home and, I'm spending the night, and now I've put them in an awkward position of, are they going to do their normal routine? They're going to get up when they want to get up.
When you go to bed.
Yes. Like, can I go to bed if I want to go to bed? If I want to lay around, in pajamas or something, like I can't do that. And if I want to get up in the middle of the night and get something to eat, I can't do that. I can't go, down the hall to the bathroom. And it's like, I got to get dressed. And then, like, am I going to get up tomorrow, and what are we going to talk about? Because I like to be quiet for an hour and a half in the mornings. And so, the funny thing is, and we didn't talk about this on your side of it, you can come back and answer this, but we don't really invite people to stay here either. Like, we've been in this present location. We've got a cabin back in the woods, and we really, really enjoy it. But there's only like 2 people outside of family that's ever stayed with us over the past 10 years. Because I don't want them to feel awkward, and this is kind of our space. And I don't mean to be selfish. That's not it. I'm not a selfish person at all. But there's just an uneasiness about it. I don't know. I just don't feel comfortable. And so Bob Warren, my mentor, stayed with us on a regular basis, but Bob and I were very close for 20 years, and we'd sit up late and talk. We'd get up early. We're both morning guys, and we would have great conversation. So outside of that, there's only a few people that's really ever stayed with us. Not that I'm trying to be, hard to get along with. It's just weird to me. We did an episode a few weeks ago. It's like, don't talk to me in the bathroom either. It's like, I don't do that. And so, I was just curious.
I like having people come stay with us, and my wife does too. Yeah, Sonia does too for the most part.
Good. I'll send all my guests over there from now on.
Totally fine. We are so here's what we've learned. We're typically on the front end very clear about what it's like when you stay here. Like, have your own room. For us, you have your own bathroom, right? We're going to do our mornings like we always do them. Like, we're just going to do our routines, and we get up at this time. We usually go to bed about this time. You're welcome to come be a guest and do whatever you want while you're here. Like, you want to go to bed early, like you want to leave and come back. It actually helped us when we started to have adult children, honestly, because with adult children, they would come and stay with you, and, they'd have their own things going on with friends from the area, whatever. And so you'd expect them to, like, be there for dinners and, like, do.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like, and so we started doing it with them, being like, hey, we're not asking you for anything. Just let us know, like what's going on with you, so we can.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it worked out.
See,
pretty
I couldn't
good.
do my morning routine either, because I get in the hot tub every morning. I'm not going to go out there and get in the hot tub. You got guests.
So I'm going to stay with you.
Hey, man, I'm fired up today. We've got Alex with us, man, the pod match master. This guy is such a great young man. He's done such a great job with his business. And
it's been fun to follow him, over time.
We've been.
I didn't know he was coming on.
Journey.
You said the other day, he's like, yeah, Alex Sanfilippo. I'm like, Alex Sanfilippo is coming on. I'm like, he's one of those, like, because we're into podcasting, so he's one of those, like, podcasting icon guys.
Yeah, he is. The guy's done just a great job. 10 years ago, Dan Miller, one of my mastermind members, invited me to look into being a podcast guest. And I kind of timid went to him and I said, Dan, we got to talk about that. He goes, okay, what is it? Like, it was nothing. And I said, first of all, I don't even know what a podcast is. He's like, what? What century are you in?
Already?
And I'm like, I don't even know what a podcast is. And he said, well, let me explain to you. And he did. And I got an opportunity to be on a show and really enjoyed it. Like, I was scared to death, but I really enjoyed it. And ironically, that has been the tool that we've used to kind of grow Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind. Done a number of shows now and have really enjoyed it, trying to just share openly kind of our story. And so it's a tool that honestly we probably use as much, if not more, than any other tool. And so, man, when I was thinking through this, I thought, man, there is a guy that comes to my mind that we've got to get on, kind of be a co-host with us today. Alex and I have had a good relationship for numbers of years, gone to dinner together, eaten lunch together, him talking through starting Podmatch, and it's been really fun to watch what he's done. So, man, let's get him in here and let's discuss podcasting.
All right, let's get him in here.
Alex, man, it is so good to have you on the show today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, Big A and Wally, appreciate you both. That truly, I was saying this before we got into this actual recording in the green room, if you will. This is just like a full circle thing for me. One of the first people that really reached out to me in podcasting was Big A at a conference, actually. And this is like a dream come true to be here. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this conversation with you guys today.
Well, you know what's pretty cool, though, and we've got to say this. I know you're not going to say it about yourself, but you recently won a pretty big award. You won the 2023 People's Choice Podcast Award for being the podcasting influencer of the year. Woo. Now, I don't know if there's any bigger award in this space than that, but man, kudos to you. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. I got it in the mail, and I was just like looking at it. I told Alicia, I'm like, how am I supposed to respond to this? I'm like, I'm so beyond thankful, like just so thankful. It's a great community that is podcasting, and yeah, so thank you for that. It's just truly an honor. I'm still kind of speechless about it.
You know, when I look at what you've developed, and fortunately, I've been on the very beginning stages of watching you. Like we've met, had dinner, and talked through, and had lunch, and saw each other at, numbers of events, and look at you going from there to having coordinated 85,000 podcast interviews, got over 10,000 people in your community now. Man, that's something to be congratulated. So well done.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Earlier, you mentioned that you've been on a few shows. By the way, I think you're like 4,000 of those shows.
I don't know. But anyway, it's been fun being a guest on those shows. But a lot of folks in our community are really interested in being a guest on shows. Some of them are even thinking about starting their own podcast. Many people in our community have their own podcast. And so I just thought it'd be fun, man, to hang out. And hey, listen, we've already introduced you, but go back and fill in the gaps a little bit. Give us a little more insight to Alex Sanfilippo.
Yeah, sure. And thank you again for having me here, guys. So podcasting is 100% what I do with my time. I run a software called podmatch.com that Big A was talking about, and that's just basically a connecting tool for podcast guest and host. I've been married far too long to use a dating app, but I'm told it works very similar to how a dating app works. It connects, instead of a date, though, it's connecting you for an interview. And my whole focus is really pouring into that community and doing my best to educate, especially independent podcasters on either side of the mic, as a guest or as a host. And this is what I absolutely love doing. I'm thrilled. And outside of that, my wife, Alicia, and I, we love being outdoors. It's funny, we work in software, but we love being outside. So we love riding bikes. We love going to the beach. We live in Jacksonville, Florida, just minutes away from the ocean. And that's kind of like our sweet spot to be there with friends. And we also both play soccer at a fairly competitive level. And we both like to volunteer at our church and just enjoy life, if you will, outside of software alone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, some of the pre-interview chat that we were having, and even some things that we were discussing we wanted to talk about today, you said that you're really at a really good spot right now from a work-life balance. Tell the listeners how you got there. This will apply regardless of the industry that you're in. But yeah, how did you get to this sweet spot?
Well, first off, Big A, I have learned a lot from you over the years, and we've had phone calls where I'm like, what on earth do I do? So I appreciate you for helping push me in the right way. What it came down to ultimately was drawing a line in the sand, which maybe sounds a little weird, but basically I just had to realize that the work will never be done and that what I do is really never urgent. No one's going to, thankfully, die as a result of what I do. I don't work in any sort of healthcare or anything like that, right? And I'm not saying I'm not doing important work, but no one is going to perish because of what I do or don't do, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So when I kind of had that realization of you know what, I have to stop allowing my, I guess just who I am, the way I'm wired naturally to be a bit of a workaholic, to no longer control me. I have to put a line in the sand. So the simplest way I've been able to do that is Alicia actually has a passcode on my computer. I am basically like a kid on my own computer. So I use an Apple device, so it's called Screen Time. At 5:30 p.m. every day, my computer locks me out of it. And without her password, I can't get back in. I don't know her password, and she's at the gym at that time of the day. So I have no option but to say, well, I guess that's my work for the day. And I've just grown to realize that I can really appreciate that hard end because it gives me a reason to prioritize work more versus just saying, you know what, tonight I can just stay up late and finish all this stuff. That's no longer an option in my life. So really, the biggest thing was drawing maybe a bit of an extreme line in the sand and just saying, you know what, I want to live life, not just work life. And really coming to that conclusion has been very helpful for me.
You know, what I really like about that story is that you're willing to go to all measures to make it happen. And Wally and I are very similar in nature. We love to work. We have to do some drastic things as well to make sure that we have some semblance of balance in our lives.
I do not have that on my phone. I'm just saying.
I don't have it either. I hope Robin doesn't listen to this.
I hope my wife doesn't listen to this episode.
Right.
I'd be like, oh man, actually maybe she should. I need that accountability. But it's good. How long has it been since you've done that, Alex? Like a couple of questions in there. So how long's it been? And then we talk about work-life balance. I'm doing that in air quotes because like there's seasons. We talked about that many times, right? But you mentioned specifically work-life balance. Like, so how long you've been doing the phone thing? And then what does actually work-life balance like mean and look like to you? Like what's a daily, obviously at 5:30 it shuts off. What else is there for you with a work-life balance?
Yeah, real quick, I should clarify. So that screen time is on my computer, and on my phone, I actually have no access to the internet or anything like that. I do use an iPhone, but same thing. There's a screen time password, and I'm only allowed to actually access my phone, my text, my GPS, and my music. And past that, I don't have any other options to even access something as simple as a calculator. It's all been blocked, which again, sounds super extreme, but I just realized the temptation to work and the reality of it, for me at least, a temptation for many other things I don't want to get involved in with social media on a phone specifically. Because typically I'm at my worst when I'm using my phone, right? I'm sitting down, like I'm not saying like in a bad place, I'm just tired. So it's very easy to slip into work or other things I just have chosen not to have in my life. So there's no digital device that I can use to access anything, if that makes sense, after a certain point. And I just say that kind of like when this started, I really went on this journey about a year ago. I'm all for having those seasons of when you really have to hustle and things like that. So when I started the software side of things, Podmatch, I knew I was committing to a couple years of probably working more hours than I should or want to. And there are some really smart founders and smart entrepreneurs that have figured out how to do it with less. I was working a lot. And every quarter, I would reevaluate my time and just cut off an hour of my day. So I probably started at 12 and worked my way down to about 8 now is what I do per day. And then about 6 months ago, I put in these hard stops that really forced me to stop, knowing that's the only way I'd ever really be able to get to that point. And I don't have any desire to do less. I like the amount of time I work. I love the work that I do. And sometimes that can be a problem, right? Much like if you really love ice cream and cookies and stuff like that, you still have to have a balance there, right? You can't just go for it 24/7 because you enjoy it. And so the hard line in the sand, again, was cutting it off, saying, okay, I've reached the point now where I think this is really good balance. And beyond that, you have to do something with your time, I believe. So I can't just like shut off work and then not have anything else going on, right? There's got to be something to replace it with. So for me, as soon as I'm done with work, I'll kind of transition out, let myself decompress a little bit. Typically, I do some prayer and stuff like that. And I do that in the morning as well, part of my morning routine before I start work. And then at the end, Alicia and I always try to find something to do with friends. We try to find a way to serve. We try to find a way to just go on dates together and really enjoy life. And so it's just a matter of having things in the calendar. We're both major extroverts. We love being around people and hanging out and doing that type of thing. So that's kind of like a day or week or year in the life of Alex, if you will.
You're both extroverts. That's awesome.
It's extreme, I guess, right? I typically opposites attract, and we're opposites in many ways, but we both love being out and around people. Let's put it that way.
Cool.
Alex, I want to dig into this just a little bit deeper. This really is not related to our topic, but it's helpful for me and for Wally and for everyone that's listening out there right now, hopefully. You just didn't come to that one day and go, you know what, I'm just going to put this on there and this is what we're going to do. What led up to that? Like, was it a major challenge where it was causing a division in your relationship? Was it something that you just really didn't have control over? How did you get to that point?
Yeah, I would say it was a kind of a combination of things, but the main driving factor was the first time in my life having stress and anxiety. I didn't even really, not that I've lived like a stress-free life. I think I've just always been able to manage it, not even know what that was. But when I started feeling the effects of and the symptoms of anxiety and feeling stressed, at first I didn't know what it was. And so I was like talking to Alicia, I'll never forget, we were outside kicking the soccer ball around, practicing. And sometimes when she's done, she'll just kick the ball in a circle. I'll just run around her really far. And so it's like, I'm burnt out trying to talk. And she's like, that's called anxiety. She goes, I struggled with that growing up before like I got through that. And I didn't realize it. And the problem is I just never stopped my mind. I just never turned it off. So even though I was working less hours, I was still checking it on my phone. I'd be like, I need 10 minutes. I just had an idea. I need to go back to the computer and kind of do this. And I was never allowing myself to actually truly relax. And because of that, or disconnect from work, as it were, I was always kind of thinking it. So, and that's when I realized, okay, I need a way that I'm forced to stop. And if I'm forced to stop, I think I would actually not have these things. And sure enough, as soon as I drew that line in the sand, right? And then I also implemented a true Sabbath. So there is a period, Saturdays is the day for me. So from Friday night until Sunday morning, I don't even touch my phone or my computer at all. Like I just leave them alone, unless of course we're out of town or there's some reason to use it. But in general, I'm just kind of doing a tech detox, if you will. And those things have really helped me a lot. But yeah, the moment was feeling that stress and anxiety for the first time and not even be able to put a word around it. And the thing is, the company was doing really well. And it was weird because that was around the same time the company started growing with or without me. And so I still don't know if it was maybe me feeling not needed, having to let go of control. I don't really know exactly what it was. I just know that when I made those changes, that went away and I'm actually doing a much better job leading now.
Wow. I do think that a lot of guys listening to this, like most people speed up their volume, the speed at which people talk,
right?
They speed it up. I can already tell they're going to have to slow it down for you, man. Because there's so many good, can you even slow it down? I don't even know. There's so many good things in there.
Right.
Man, that you're talking about. I encourage everybody to just listen to what he said. We need to go back and listen to that again. Like just hit that back 30 seconds or whatever a few times. And man, what you just said is gold. The fact that you were growing a company like you were and that you tied that to leadership, your ability to lead better, and you drew that hard line in the sand, man, that is so hard for so many of us. So hard.
Alex,
Congrats.
I think it would be even more difficult for you with a new company that's growing so rapidly because it's like, man, just another hour or two, I could even make it grow faster. And so it's in the podcast space. And the other thing that's interesting for you that could be a help is like it's international what you do. Like at any time of the day or night, you could be on a podcast, you could be listening to a podcast, helping your clients. And so that takes even more discipline. And so kudos to you, man. You're a young guy and you've got it figured out at an early age. Let us all learn from that.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Way to go. Hey, you were talking about something that was a real challenge for you right now. One of your largest challenges is building a volunteer type community. Let's dive into that for a second. What does that look like in the podcast space, a volunteer type community?
Yeah. So for me, I really love community-driven type of things. As a matter of fact, our community, I'll just call it the Podmatch community, that's what we have kind of coined it. They know that Alicia and I have some work-life balance. We've actually made that known that like, hey, these are kind of the hours we work and we're in Florida. So it's like our time zone. We'll make sure we get back to you and all that. So we've made that very known and our whole team kind of works those. Yeah, I guess we have some people that are maybe up to 2 hours time different than us. But like in general, we're all about in the same time zone. And so we've just made that known in the community. And because of that, we've also just told the community, hey, if you're enjoying this, can you help us spread the word? And the interesting thing is I said that, Big A, and Wally, like I was like, hey, this is like kind of something maybe everyone says, right? But I said it and people did something. And I was shocked. I was like, oh, wow. Like people were emailing in saying, hey, thanks so much for like letting me be part of your growth. I invited like 10 of my friends and like 3 of them joined. And it's like, whoa, I had no idea that type of thing existed. And so I immediately tried to wrap my head around, okay, how can we thank these people, one, but how can we make this part of our culture, of our community? How can I lead in a way that people want to share it? And the reality is I really don't do it for the monetary growth. I do it because I firmly believe in podcasting as a guest or as a host. Like the power of what podcasting is and the freedom that these messages provide is incredible. Like if you want to learn something new, I don't know about you guys, I go straight to podcasts. That's the first place I go. I type it in. I want to find somebody sharing their raw experience with this, no filter. Like, give it to me straight. Like I actually want to learn and grow from that. And so for me, I'm very much so driven by my passion for helping independent voices get elevated and heard. And I believe that podcasting is the best way to do that. And I want to build a community of people that see that vision and want to bring others into it as well. And so for me, yeah, it's been a little bit of like a struggle of figuring out like how exactly do you do that, right? And I'll say one of the best ways I've been able to do that is through podcast guesting. Yes, I have my own show, which is my platform, and there's really no second to that in my mind. But beyond that, being a guest on other people's shows, it just builds this great relationship with members of our community that then go and inspire and bring people back to what we're doing to grow our community and the culture even stronger.
Let's dive into that just a little bit further. Like when you say you don't think there's any better platform to share your product or service out there, is podcasting for any and everybody? I mean, does it matter what the product is? Does it matter what the service is? Or is there a better kind of situation for being a guest or having your own show? What are you seeing in that space?
Yeah, I don't think anything's ever for anybody. I mean, the podcaster wants to say, yes, it's for everybody, right? Like, you guys both know that, but like the reality is that's probably not the case. And for some people, right, if you have like a very visual type product, I mean, YouTube is going to be better, right? And for other people, some big advertising is probably going to be better. Like if you're Coca-Cola, Pepsi, right? Like sponsoring a football field or a stadium is probably better for you than having a podcast. Like that's the reality of what it is, because that makes people thirsty and they're there and they're willing to spend $8 on a drink or whatever it costs at a sporting event, right? But in general, if you're maybe a smaller business or a lifestyle business or an individual, a coach, that sort of thing, the main thing you're trying to get there to do is develop know, like, and trust. In my mind, there's just nothing more powerful than getting to hear somebody share their life, their opinion in a very unscripted way to see if you can develop that know, like, and trust with them. A great example of this is a couple of years ago, I wanted to get into SMS marketing, just basically text message marketing, right? I wanted to see if I could reach out to our community in that way. Again, kind of going through this whole thing, trying to figure out how to connect people really well. And when I did that, when I went to go do that, I found some companies, but then I went straight to podcast. I'm like, is anybody talking about how to do this well? I found one podcast and one person talking about it. It was the CMO at one of those companies. And I'll tell you what, I started listening. This person was just throwing knowledge out, like so good. And honestly, I really liked the person as well. I'm like, this is a cool guy. Like, I feel like I could be friends with him. So guess which product I ended up buying? I had options, but I clearly went with that one. And as a fun test after this, I told Alicia this as well. I went back to see where they fell on the pricing point. And they were the most expensive of the three. Granted, their core offering was about the same, but I didn't have any buyer's remorse because I'm like, well, no, I really liked him and I think he's doing a great job with this product and he's helped educate me and I think he's a cool guy. So maybe I'll even get to meet him, right? And that's kind of what made me decide. I think that to me is, in the essence, the power of podcasting.
Definitely. That's so cool. That's so good. Thank you for sharing that.
If you could summarize why guesting is important, what would your summary be? There's countless reasons, but what would a good summary be for you as to why being a guest is important?
There's a lot, but I'd say it's establishing your leadership and your mark. I can expand on that if that's helpful as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So expanding on your leadership and your mark, basically, first off, like there's the unspoken benefit of being a podcast guest, which is the SEO boost, search engine optimization. I mean, you're getting links to your website from podcasts, which come from Apple, Google, Amazon, YouTube, and Spotify, and hundreds, if not thousands of other places that are posting this content. And all those links go back to you. That tells search engines, hey, this person's probably legit. Apple says that they are, right? Google says that they are. All these places are telling them that, hey, this is a legit individual or business. And that right there is huge. When we launched our company, I worked with an SEO guy because I wanted to see, hey, we're doing things right. He said, hey, you're doing a ton of things wrong. Side note, right? But he said, but one thing you're doing right. And he goes, and I don't actually know how you did it. He goes, how is your domain's authority so high? And this was about 3 months after we launched, in just 3 months. He's like, I've literally never seen this before. Like, what did you do? How are you doing this? And I just told him like, oh, I've been going on a bunch of podcasts. And he was able to validate that the reason my website started ranking so high in different searches is because, again, all the link backs from these other places. So when I say leaving a mark, it's very quickly showing you, putting you on the map, right? But beyond that, it's also kind of like legacy perspective of like leaving a mark. Like you're getting to share your story. I mean, I like a couple of years ago, my grandfather passed away. Loved the Lord. He lived a very, very long life, and it was his time. And he left us a CD where he sang his favorite like 12 or 15 songs, which I thought was a really cool, beautiful thing. He was a singer. He actually played the harmonica in some of them as well, which is really cool. And we love that. In my mind, I'm like, man, I wish that he could have been on a few podcasts where he could go back and listen to some things just about his life. But that wasn't an option then. But now that is, right? So the legacy for your business, for you as an individual, that's just a really powerful thing. And then establishing your own leadership. Let's put it this way. When I got started, I wasn't really the best speaker. I was stuttering a lot. I was fumbling over my words a lot. Like it took me a while. But now when I meet people or I get asked something random in front of a group, I can articulate what I'm trying to say very well. And people regularly comment me like on my words, my ability to speak really well. And people are like, how'd you learn how to do that? Like, I don't have any formal training necessarily of how to speak or coach before, but the main reason is being on podcast. I get asked questions that I need to come up with an answer for. I need to try to answer it shorter. I'm always working on that. I need to talk a little slower as well, right? But these are things I'm learning along the way. So for me, again, it's establishing my ability to communicate well, which in many ways is our ability to lead others. And so those to me are a few of the things that really establish. And the kind of the rest of it is growing a business, growing a brand, getting your reputation, like your thought leadership known, if you will.
So one of the questions on my mind, and I know it's on a lot of our guests' mind, is I hear you and that sounds really good. This takes time and energy and effort and money. That all translates into money. Like, I'm just probably the average listener is thinking, how is this, like, where's my ROI on this? Like, can you speak into like some of the things that you've seen? I'm not talking about people who are playing, right? Because there's lots of people that'll play, right? They'll try one or two. Oh, it didn't work. I'm talking people doing the work.
Right.
Right. So the people doing the work in guesting, what are some examples? And yeah, there may be like, if you have more average examples, that'd be great, because there's always going to be like some crazy, awesome, cool story out there. But it gives us all something to aspire to. But are there some like realistic average person examples that you can provide, or that you've seen or experienced or observed that are like, yeah, like this really works, and here's the value. Beyond leadership is important, legacy is important, leaving our mark on the world is important. I agree with those. No, I'm not taking any value away from that. At the end of the day, I have so much time, so much energy, so much money. I want to be able to put that in the places that's going to give the most value in all areas, right? So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, Big A, I actually want to hear your answer to this. Do you mind if I pass it over? I mean, I'll answer as well, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. It just give some context. I've probably done like 1/5 of the number of podcasts you have, or maybe 10% of them. So I'd love to hear even your experience, if that's okay.
Yeah. So it's a very good question. I was anxious to hear your answer as well, Alex, and we'll circle back, but I'll make a pass at it just for a second. I think I did some things right, but looking back now, I question it. And it was like, if you could fog a mirror and you had a microphone, I would be your guest, right? It didn't matter. I mean, if you had a podcast and you had 3 downloads,
you could fog a mirror. I've never heard you say that one before.
Yeah, I don't know.
If you
could
you
fog
come
a
up with
mirror,
this stuff.
I don't know. It had a microphone. Like, I would be your guest. I would get on there and spend an hour. I would spend an hour of pre-work. I would promote the show. I do think there was some benefit in that, and getting some name recognition. Other people then just like, hey, I listened to this show and this show and this show. You were there. In hindsight, I look back and I'm like, I probably talked to a lot of people that is not our avatar, right? At all. Not even our customer. Hopefully I gave them some good advice and they made it applicable to their life and it was beneficial. That's my prayer. But from an ROI standpoint, we get members to join our coaching program, or to join the summit that we do, or to join Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind. I'm not sure. So I think that it probably took me a lot more time, simply because if you remember 10 years ago, I didn't know what a podcast was, going to being a guest on podcasts. So I think as far as the amount of time, I did do a lot of interviews, and I probably spent more time than I should. I think if I had it to go over, I would have been a little more particular. I would have done a little more research to see if they were our avatar. I probably would have done 2 or 3 guesting a week instead of 10 or 20, at which I did for numbers of months and years. And so I think I would have built a better. I really hit the wall at some point too, right? It burns you out.
It did burn you out for sure. It burnt you out.
Yeah, it did. And
level,
so, at that pace I was going for years and years and years, it did. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I talk about it in length, where I took 2 months off, right? I did hit the wall. And so just word of caution there. I do think it is worth the time. I do think it's worth the energy if it's structured better. Quite honestly, Alex, I was a little envious of how you've already got it figured out and putting the guardrails up. I should have figured that out a little earlier myself. There's minimal cost associated with it for the ROI, right? It doesn't cost that much. We've got better equipment now, obviously. When I started, we didn't. For maybe $500 to $1,000, you could get set up. And you could do, so determining the ROI, We have 150 members now from a number of different countries that pay us a monthly recurring fee to be in our mastermind, and they've done that for 10 years. And so there's a huge ROI, and it's certainly been beneficial for us. So that's my pass at it, Alex. What about you?
It was good. I think that was great. There's a lot of things I kind of want to piggyback off of, but I love that we're now talking about like the actual dollar for dollar monetary, I guess, benefit of guesting, right? Is what we're really getting into. There's a lot of best practices for sure, but the one thing that the Big A really mentioned, I think is really important is finding your niche that you go into. And that all starts from you kind of discovering your why. And if you already know your why, how does it translate into podcasting? Who should the listener be? We just call that an avatar in this space. But really figuring that out. And when you start with why, you also want to think about, okay, how is this going to have an ROI? I have some people that are like, hey, podcasting hasn't turned into anything profitable for me. I'm like, okay, well, what's your product or service? Well, I don't have one yet. I'm like, I don't, this is typically someone new. I'm not trying to pick on them, but I'm like, I don't know how you're going to make money if you don't have something to make money with, right? And I get that question a lot. But if somebody's like, hey, I actually have a product or service, you have to think about it. What is the likelihood that someone's going to buy that? Are you already selling it, right? And if you've proven it and it's picking up momentum outside of podcasting as a guest, then I think that works really well. And Big A, it's funny, like the gear, I probably spent out the same as you, but it's gotten a lot more affordable. Like I just met somebody the other day. They have a camera that cost half as much as mine, a mic that cost a quarter of mine, and it looks and sounds better. So for a few $100s, I mean, you can be a truly standout guest. A host can be like, I want that on my show. And that really does separate you a lot. So if you're willing to make that small investment, that's huge. And so I think that a few things are important. Again, start with why, think about the niche that you actually serve, like who could actually buy from you, and then think about the avatar, the ideal listener. And don't go on shows that don't fit that. I mean, here's the thing. If you like golf, but your product is I'm a Jacksonville, Florida guy. So if it's a surfboard, maybe don't go on a golf podcast, even though it might be fun to talk about. Unless you just purely want to do it for fun, great. But you do risk eventually burning yourself out. And when I found the most successful guests, they have a cadence, a rhythm, so they can keep this a long-term part of their life. On either side of the mic, whether you're a guest or host, it's all about longevity in this space. I know a lot of people that really hustle to get on 30 podcasts in 30 days. And the thing is, 30 days later, they're like, I am totally burnt out and I don't know if it did anything. But they didn't really have time to develop the relationship with the host or anything like that, right? And I tell people a much better strategy, go on 12 a year. And for a month straight, do your best to really get that in front of everybody you know so that host says, this is the best guest I've ever had on my show. Because many of them will, if you spent that much devotion to getting it out there, to spreading the word about, to giving that much prep into it, that lives on forever. And that show could take off in 2 or 3 years, so it could grow. And so I tell people, like, stick with more of like a cadence that you can do for a long-term part of your life instead of just trying to sprint and getting on every show you possibly can. Really have that focus. And I always like to just kind of like to bring this full circle. Begin with the end in mind. What is the end result? What is the goal you're looking for? And remember that unspecific goals yield unspecific results. If you don't specifically know the value you're going to add and what the conversion may look like in your call to action, you might get unspecific results. And if you get that, there's probably not going to be a true ROI on it. And I kind of shared a lot of theory there. I hope it's helpful.
I do want to go back. Right? Hope
it's not. Right. Alex, I do want to go back just a little bit. There is one little caveat that I would say. If you haven't had any formal training or teaching and speaking, to your point earlier, you've gotten much better articulating yourself as a result. So I think before I went on the real path to be on the shows of your avatar, maybe 30, 60, 90 days, do what I did early to practice, right? Go on even the shows they get 3 downloads, right? And so you can say your message, you can articulate what it is you're trying, because you don't want to get an opportunity to go on Pat Flynn or Jordan Harbinger or John Lee Dumas, and it's your first time ever. You know what's the irony of this? My very first interview was John Lee Dumas on Entrepreneur on Fire.
If I'm mistaken, it's one of his most popular episodes too, isn't it? I think it's one of his most popular of all time.
I don't know. But anyway, I had notes everywhere. Like if you looked at my office, there was notes on top of notes. I was scared to death. And I laid in the floor when that episode went live and I said, Robin, please tell me that's not me. Like, listen how country and Southern this guy is. And she said, no, baby, that's you. That's you. And I was like, oh my gosh. If I had it to go over, I would have done a dozen shows before that. and I would have practiced. And so is the only caveat to what you're saying, right? Do the 12 shows if that's what's good, but get some reps in first, right?
Brilliant.
You want to kind of get the nervousness away.
So important. I Big A, like you, my first show, I didn't even know. My first time guesting was a big show as well. And I'm told I did okay, but I didn't have a clear call to action.
Right.
So at the end, I'm getting people texting me because I gave my phone number out on it. I'm having people email me, hit me up all the social platforms. And I had a product at that point, but I never even mentioned where the product was. So I was like, oh man, big missed opportunity from my first one. So like you, I actually think that's really great advice. Go out there and have fun. Go on the golf podcast if you like golf, right? If they'll have you, get out there and get the reps in so you really get the hang of it. And a lot of newer hosts, that's what they're looking for as well. They want someone to come get the reps in with them. But do remember, you never know when that's going to take off. About 2 years, I guess it was actually 4 years ago now. Time flies. About 4 years ago now, I was on a podcast that for some reason just started taking off, and people who are listening to me on that show 4 years ago are starting to reach out to me. And it's like, what? Like, that's just wild. The show is done really well now, and people are going back and listening to the back catalog. So keep that in mind as well. Although it might have 3 people listening now, at some point that might be 300 or 3,000.
You know, it's funny. We had a guy join Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind a couple of weeks ago, and he said he's been following us and listening to my interviews for 10 years. Wow. And I was like, well, I didn't do something right if it took you 10 years to get on. But my point is the timing wasn't right for him until now, but he had been hearing us and following us for that long. The other thing that I love what you said, pragmatically, I want to talk about some things as we kind of go forward, is that they're evergreen. Those interviews never go away. The ones that I did 10 years ago are still out there. Fortunately and unfortunately, some of them are still out there. But the thing is you've already pointed out some of the SEO value in that. Let's talk about pragmatically. Like if someone today is listening to this and they're like, hey, they've piqued my interest, and like I could be talked into maybe being a guest first, or should they start their own show first? Like, have you seen something that's proven to work well? Start your own, be a guest first. What does Alex say?
Nothing's better than having your own platform. So being a host, I think, is kind of like the top. I mean, it's your platform. And still to this day, I think it holds the most clout. Like if I say I have a YouTube channel, most people are like, yeah, so does my 12-year-old nephew, right? When you say you have a podcast that has hundreds of episodes, people are like, really? That's interesting. What's it about, right? And so I think it holds a lot of value. With that said, it's a lot more work on that side of the mic. And if you don't know if you like it, I don't suggest starting with a podcast. I suggest being a guest on a handful of shows. And if you come back and you say, Alex, Wally, Big A, I hate this, then guess what? Don't start a podcast, right? Then just go that route. So I always tell people, start on the guesting side. See if you like it. And the thing is, again, if you build those relationships with hosts, you just possibly found your first guests as well if you decide to launch. And so I think the better side to start on is truly the guest side. And I think to figure out if you enjoy it.
Or let's say that Bobby's out there today. He's got a coaching program and he's got a unique story. He wants to get down and tell his story. He wants to add value. And I always say, go at it with, and kudos to you too, Alex, because when you and I talked about you being a co-host on our show, I was even mentioning some of the things that we were going to talk about. And I love what you said. You said, Big A, listen, I just want to add value to your audience. It was taking the focus off of yourself. And so many people get that backwards. They're like, I want to get on and tell about my book that's launching, and I want to tell about this new product and my coaching. It's like, no, that's not a good place to start. The best place to start is to add value. Like, what is it that I can talk about that can add value to this community? And that natural reciprocity, it's going to come back 10x, right? Talk about your experience with that.
Yeah, I'm again all about that side of things. Like leading with value, laying it all out there if you possibly can is the way to go. The data actually shows that podcast listeners are extremely smart. They're on average, they make more money than most people, and they also are far more educated. A lot of them can tell if you're trying to be sleazy. And so I always tell people, pretend like everyone listening is smarter than you. And so you're trying to trick a much smarter person than you. So for me, I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to put it all out there and just see what sticks. I don't do it to like try to trick anybody or anything like that. Like I really am here to serve. Like I really, again, believe in the power of podcasting. And so I think that if you show up in a way saying, I'm going to give everything I possibly can. I'm not going to save chapter 4 for those who buy the book, right? Instead, I'm just going to really share it all. And the people that resonate with it, I just believe they're going to take action. And to me, a very important element of that is having one clear call to action. Because what I find can be really tough is if you don't have any sort of call to action. So it's just like you add all this value and then you didn't tell anybody about you. They're just like, oh, that guy was really cool. Wish I could find him. You need to be basically like, hey, if you are interested in more, this is where I'm at. I'll add even more value there and try to serve you the best I can. And doing something like that is really how you start to get that conversion.
When we hear, so been in the marketing world a long time. So when I hear the word call to action, and probably most people hearing the word call to action, one of the first things their mind is drawn to is, oh, I got to give away a PDF. Like I bet I would love to take a poll right now if we could on this podcast. Like how many people that's what they thought. Like call to action, give away a PDF. Walk us. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying like that's what we think, and so that's conventionally what's been done historically. You just gave a very simple, different answer. What are some of the things that you've seen when we say give a call to action? You're adding value because you're telling the real story. You're not holding anything back. Sharing your experiences and your observation and experiences of others. And this goes to anybody guesting, right? There comes a point where it's like, okay, I need to have a call to action. What are some examples of appropriate calls to actions for like different types of businesses that you've experienced?
Yeah, Wally, I love this. This is like such an important thing I think so many of us decide to skip. First and foremost, there's no one size fits all. I wish there was like a silver bullet, right? And it's just like, if you do this, you're going to crush it.
Easier.
But if you do have like a book and a book's what you're talking about, a great way to do it is give away the first chapter. Hey, go to viewfromthetop.com/chapter1 or free or something like that, right? And then people can go there, they can download the first chapter. And if they like it, from there, they can go buy the book. That's a great thing. So that might be a good PDF, if you will, type of thing. Or for me, I was talking about work-life balance, right? If you had a PDF one sheet of like the 5 ways I've been able to save, to get an extra 4 hours out of my day, I would probably be very interested in listening, like reading that, right? So it makes sense in some cases. Other times, something that I really love I've been seeing people do, and this is actually what I do now, is having some sort of quiz. So basically, I'm like, hey, if you think that you enjoy this and you want to get into podcasting, there's a quiz you can go through and it'll kind of tell you where you might fall short or some of the strengths you might have, some of the things you might need. It's completely free. Go enjoy that. I think if I was really serious about launching a show or being a guest and there was that thing, right, I might be like, ooh, that's going to be tailored to me. I would be very interested in that. That type of thing works really well. I've seen some people get away with doing even just texting. And they have a number where they say, hey, this number is like, if you want to chat with me, this number is a Google Voice one set up for that. Drop me a text at this number. There's all kinds of things. What matters is figuring out what works for you. And some people, they even just offer a discount on their product, right? Like, and sometimes that works for people. And I don't know, you've been in marketing longer than I have. Maybe you know some things that would just be like really unique and work well.
Yeah. Is that that PDF they give away, that book or that information, whatever it is, that content that you're going to give away is going to be helpful to somebody. I don't want to ask this. Is it important that that's aligned with the avatar? We talked about the word avatar before. Like that should be directed specifically to your person that you're trying to, otherwise you could have a bunch of people. I've seen this happen, right? Where someone gives away something that sounds fun and they just get them in their lead flow, their funnel. And you got people following up with people that are like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not that person, you know? So is there a relationship there? Like if you're going to focus on something, is that important?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think you only have one call to action. I think it's got to be one. Because think about when most people are listening to podcasts, they're in the car, they're cooking, they're cleaning, they're working out. It's got to be simple and memorable that they can just quickly jot down a note or remember it clearly to go to it. A great example is like talking about, I used surfing as an example earlier. If I have a surfing podcast and you're thinking about buying your first board, if I had a quiz that you could take to tell you how big the board should be, it'll help you pick a brand that matches your budget. And then it takes you to a landing page where my affiliated boards are all listed. This is a bit of a weird example. Sorry, guys. I'm a beach guy. So, but follow me there, right? Like now I just gave you, hey, this board based on your budget, your size, your weight, and your ability to surf or inability if you're new, this is probably your best option. And now I'm very likely to convert that. But again, if I went on a golf podcast, I'm like, by the way, if you're thinking about surfing, go check it out. Golfers are like, I don't like surfing. It's why I play golf, right? So yeah, I think it has to be really clear and let that even be your compass on if you should be on a show or not, right? Like that's a great idea. It's like, oh, you know what? There's no one who's listening to this that probably is interested in what I offer, so maybe it's just not the best show for me. Oh, there's an extreme sports show. I'll go on that one. That one might actually work. And so it's just kind of thinking about, it helps you, again, think about the avatar and who you really serve based off the service that you can provide them.
That's good.
Alex, I want to give a few things that we do behind the scenes to help people that are thinking about guesting. And then Wally, because I know Wally, you've been on a number of podcasts as well as a guest. And then Alex, you can add a few things to that. I know we've already talked a little bit about doing the reps early if you're brand new, right? Just to break the ice, to get familiar. But I think once you're past that, you really need to know the audience. You need to do your research. You need to dive in and listen to some of the episodes, kind of know who the guest is. So think through that. So we do the research on the podcast. Is this, like I'm not on any explicit podcast. That just doesn't align with our brand. And so I'm not on that. So I or a member of our team will listen to those. I think it's really important too that you're prepared. And a lot of people get on, it's like, I don't know what to say. I think you need to have some talking points and even put them on your computers. Like, hey, this is kind of a structure. I don't want to chase rabbits. And so just be prepared. The podcast host is going to ask you questions, but you can kind of have some semblance of order, some talking points. I think the equipment is important. We touched on that a little bit earlier. Guys that are doing podcast interviews from their car, that's not going to go well. You need to be in an environment where you don't hear, the baby in the background crying. They want a professional setting sound. The sound is, the video is not as important. If you got good video, that's great. But I think the sound is really important.
We get that here sometimes. We've had guests come on, they're in their car.
Have. Like, what are you doing?
What are we doing? What's going on?
We didn't prepare them well enough. I don't know.
So
that's on us,
we can't
right?
do that.
Real quick, if I can just mention some of the equipment, because for me, that was the most intimidating part. Although I'm like a software guy, like the equipment always freaks me out. I have a USB plugged straight into my laptop, webcam, and a USB microphone. And I really think if you find Logitech 4K webcam is what I use. And I don't even recommend this mic. Just go to
my camera.
Go to a website like Amazon type of thing and type in dynamic microphone. Dynamic means if I take 4 steps away from this mic, you can't hear me anymore. That gets rid of don't do it in your car still, but it gets rid of the majority of the sound. My wife can be hanging out with people in the other room and you can't hear them, right? There can be someone mowing my lawn outside. You can't hear that because I'm using what's called a dynamic microphone. Again, a couple $100 is what you'll spend. And if you decide you hate podcasting, I actually learned this when I sold my old gear. You can basically sell it for the same amount you bought it for. So it's a very little bit of an investment. But and the other thing you said, Big A, is just listen to 2 or 3 episodes of a show. I am shocked at when I do that, how many podcast hosts go, wow, you actually listened to the show? I'm like, did no one else? Like, am I the first one to do that? You're 300 episodes in. What do you mean? And it makes a huge difference because you understand what you're stepping into.
Your conversation is much different because you can mention a family member or an activity or sport that they're familiar with or they like, and now we've got a real conversation. And I think it's important going along those lines of really being interested in the other person, not just there to highlight yourself because, like you said, people can smell that out a mile away. The other thing is get there early, right? Don't be late. Don't be late to these interviews. These people, their time is important. Your time is important. Engage, with the conversation. And I'll tell you, Alex, you're way better at this than I am. I'm way too long-winded. Like, I talk way too long.
Long list of 9 things you're telling us right now.
Yeah. And so I'm just saying these are things important, Wally. You listen for a minute. You may learn something. But
there's 10. I'm sorry. There is 10.
Yeah, there is 10. I've got just a couple more and I'll be through. You got to promote the episode. We always do that. Show a lot of gratitude. And then the last thing I do is I always ask the podcast host, listen, if I did a good job, would you recommend me to another podcast host? Would you make an introduction? And quite honestly, over the past 5 years, that is the way that I've gotten on most shows. And then the last thing, I didn't have it even on my own notes, but we created a press kit that has served value beyond anything that we've done because it gives every link, every question, everything about me, all of our social media platforms. The least work the podcast host has to do, the better. And if you send them a press kit, it's going to almost assure you to be on their show. So, Alex, what have I missed? What have I left out?
I want to highlight the press kit. Media one sheet's another way to say it. Something you can send the host. And the reason that matters is if you give the host no direction, you're giving them permission to go any direction. So if you happen to go to jail or prison 20 years ago, they may bring that up when they find that in a web search, right? And if that's not what you want to talk about, you better give them some direction. Having a press kit says, here's the context of what it is that I want to speak about and what I can speak about. You're now telling the host, go do your research, but do it within this container, right? And some of them will have very unique questions that you've probably never been asked before, even with that container, if you will. But that is so important. And for me, I used to not have that. And when I didn't, I was talking about aerospace a lot because that was my background. I got out of that corporate life. I loved it, but that's not what I want to talk about anymore. I want to talk about podcasting. And without setting the expectation up front, your host may, even though it's right in front of them, right? They may still go a wrong direction to try to make it really unique. So yeah, that press kit's really important. Beyond that, the last thing I'll mention, I love the idea of, like, people are probably asking, like, how do I get on a show? Talk to somebody you know. Talk to Wally, talk to Big A, and ask them, hey, is there a show you'd recommend for me? Here's what I talk about. I don't want to put you guys on the spot and make you guys booking agencies, but like in general, they might know someone that you have good synergy with if you're in their mastermind, if they know you, that they can probably recommend. It might be someone else in the mastermind even. And the last thing I'll mention is make sure you do a good job with the actual, we call it like a pitch, which maybe sounds a little weird, but basically your initial outreach to a host. Hosts hear from a lot of potential guests, a lot. You're not the only person reaching out even that on that given day. There might be others. So do something to show that you really put in a little bit of time and effort. I always say lead with value, even with that. So if I'm going to ask to be on a guest on a podcast, I always first leave a review of the show after I listen to it. I might only listen to one episode while I'm working out or something like that, but I'm going to go leave them an Apple review and attach that. Right there, I have their attention, guaranteed. No host is not thankful for you actually leaving them a review. And at that point, now I can make a really meaningful request saying, hey, I'd like to be on your show. So always think about also that initial outreach. And aside from that, everything Big A said is pure gold. I mean, that's how it works.
Alex, final comments or thoughts. And then I want you to end with, tell us a little bit more about Podmatch, a little bit more about how it works pragmatically, and how the audience can contact you.
Yeah, and thank you again it's an honor to be here. It's kind of a final thought. I always want to remind everybody that we should be doing this to serve the one person who needs us most. Again, the beauty of podcasting is the fact that somebody's hearing on the other side that is looking for what it is that you're offering. And even if you're like a comedian, they might be looking to laugh, and you might be the only person who makes them laugh that day. So just remember the power of serving that one person. And I always tell people, like, regardless of the numbers of a podcast, be there and show up for the one person who really needs you. That's the way I do my best to always show up, that there's one Iron Sharpens Iron mastermind member that needed to hear what we're sharing today. And that's why I'm very happy to be here. And if you can have that mindset, I find that you do very well as a podcast guest. Beyond that, Podmatch is what you asked me to mention. Yeah, so podmatch.com has everything I do. If you go to podmatch.com/free, it'll kind of lead you into all the different things that I do and how I can serve and help and things like that. Nothing there has a paywall or anything like that. Once you're on Podmatch, there is a fee associated with helping you get booked as a guest or looking for guests for your podcast. And we do a lot of automations along the way to really help streamline that process. And the whole goal of Podmatch is just, can we get more time to focus on what we love, which is the actual interview, and less time on exchanging the emails, sending calendar invites, and all the other things that go along with it, right? Can we just find a way to streamline that so we can get the conversation out to really serve that one person? And so, yeah, podmatch.com/free is where you can find everything I do.
Yeah, man. What a great guy, Alex, man. I so love what you're doing. I love your energy. I love you as a person. You're just a great guy. You've been a great friend for a number of years. So, man, thank you for being with us today. Listen, I can't even begin to tell you how nervous I was when I became a podcast guest. And I want to encourage you, the listener, right now. No one else can tell your story but you. And I want to encourage you to go out there. There's a lot of experts maybe in your space, but nobody has got the story that you do. Follow the fundamental framework that we gave you today, but I want you to tailor it to make it your own. Don't go do ours. Don't do Wally's. Don't do Alex's. You go do your own, but just kind of follow this fundamental framework. And if you believe in your message, I want you to hone your skills. I want you to practice your delivery so that you too can be an amazing podcast guest. Listen, I can't wait to see you making your rounds on this circuit so that you too can have your very own View from the Top.
Hey, I just want to let everybody know the best way to connect with us. People ask us, hey, how can I connect with you guys? One of the easiest ways, if you go to viewfromthetop.com/group, that's viewfromthetop.com/group. You'll be redirected over to a private LinkedIn group just for Christian business owners, entrepreneurs, and professionals. And we love to connect with you there. We carry on some of the conversations we're having in here, dive a little deeper. And also, it's a great place. I think there's well over, I don't know if we're pushing 300 or whatever, but there's a number of guys in there that you would align with. So I'd encourage you to go over there, get connected. That's viewfromthetop.com/group. And you can just apply to join in there, and we'll let you in as long as you pass the sniff test. and can carry on some of these conversations. So we hope to see you there, and we'll see you next week.